Hi, my name is Lewis Ormerwood and I'm a technical support consultant at Trimble UK. Today we'll be looking at the changes which have been made to the UK environment relating to the steel detailer role and drawing output and production. I will be showing some additions which have been made to the rule sets within the master drawing catalogue, project properties and object level settings within assembly drawings. You can use the control panel on the right hand side to interact with us, so please ask any questions in there. Questions will be answered at the end of the webinar or by email. Please view the webinar in full screen to get the optimal experience. The button is shown here on the control panel. So today I'll be using the steel detailer role. Just a bit of background information about these roles for any existing users or new users that may have seen the older naming conventions. Previously the roles and settings have been named as Style 1 to Style 5 or as Steel Detailer including CE marking. One of the main reasons behind this was to allow us to release improved drawing settings without affecting the current Tekla setup for existing users. The need for the files to be named differently has also reduced due to most Tekla users now using a firm folder or a model template to store their custom settings. You will find that in our latest version 2021, the style naming convention has been stopped and the roles are simply named Steel Detailer or Steel Detailer Legacy. So I'm just going to demonstrate some additions that we've made to the project properties, user-defined attributes. In particular, the Fabrication Drawing Style tab. If we take a look under this tab, we'll see that the option Please Select a Border option is set to 1, so this will produce a assembly drawing border on the right hand side of the drawing sheet. We can change this to 2, which will set the assembly drawing borders to produce along the bottom of the drawing sheet. We can also see in there we've got the toggle for the fabrication status box, so we can set this from yes to no, so there's no visual indication on there, but this will actually remove the fabrication status box from the drawings. So I will give a bit of a description of how these actually work. So within Tekla we've added a couple of extra attributes, one being the border option, the other being the fabrication status box. If we open the associated objects IMP file, which allows you to modify menus such as these, we can see in there we've got the image selection for option 1 and option 2. So when we alternate between 1 and 2, that's why this image changes to indicate whether it's a horizontal or a vertical border. And then we've got the image for the fabrication status at the bottom. You can also see we've got the border attribute and the fab status attribute. So the border attribute has the option 1, 2 or blank. Likewise with the fab status attribute we've got no, yes or blank. So if we go into a drawing, which I've just created, if we double click a template and choose Drawing Layout Editor, it's going to give you an idea of how these templates are actually linked together. So we've pretty much got the exact same copy of the Steel Special Notes 1, Steel Fabrication Status 1, but then we've also got the variation with the _2 at the end. So you can see all of the 2s are at the bottom of the drawing, so they are horizontal, and all of the 1s are on the right hand side of the drawing. So these are templates that are built into this layout, but half of them won't appear depending on what we set that border option to. So to very briefly show you an example, if I just double click one of these templates, what we'll find in the template row is a formula. So we've got the normal formula in there for identifying the hierarchy level, but then we've got the AND get value project user defined border equals 2. So what you'll find if you inquire every single one of our drawing templates on assembly drawings is that we have a extra addition into the formula whereby it says whether it's part of border 1 or part of border 2, which is why the templates will only show up dependent on which option you set within project properties. Another addition to the project properties user-defined attributes is the GA drawings tab. So under this tab we can see similar options to the fabrication drawing style, in which we can choose 1 or 2 for different border styles for a GA drawing, or we can choose to show the GA material box or exclude it from a drawing. And if we just go into the document manager, just have a look at this GA drawing, and then the layout editor, we can see there again we have templates that exist that aren't actually visible unless we set the relevant attributes within the project properties. If I double click one of these, editing template editor, we'll see a formula in there that just says if the value of the project user defined GA mat attribute equals yes, then output. So we've also introduced some attributes at part level. So if I double click this column and I go to user defined attributes, under the company settings tab, you'll notice we now have exclude drawing from production and AO drawing required. So we can actually change this to yes for some parts in the model if we don't want drawings to be created for those parts. A good example of that would be for existing steelwork, so you wouldn't have to keep filtering those out from your drawing production. You could just set this to yes one time, and then all future drawing creation will exclude this part from the drawings. And the way that works is if we take a look at the selection filters that are used in the master drawing catalogue, and if we scroll down to steel beam, so we've got the normal filter options in there, being it's looking for the words beam in capitals or beam in lowercase, and also not looking for any cold rolled manufacturer prefix. If we go to the bottom of the list, you'll see template user defined exclude drawing does not equal yes. So this rule basically is saying if yes is not in this attribute or in this box, then output the drawing as normal. So if we take a look at the A0 drawing required option, if this was set to yes, this again works alongside the selection filters which are linked into the master drawing catalogue. So if we scroll down the selection filter list again, we can see we've got steel beam A0, steel column A0, and a few other options for A0. So this filter is pretty much identical, minus the drawing required attribute, but it also now has the template user defined A0 size option equals yes. So if this is set to yes in the part, this filter will identify that, and in turn, if we go to the master drawing catalogue and then edit the rule set, in particular assembly drawings, we can see in there we have portal column A0, beam A0, and you'll notice that these are actually above the main column setting because we want to pick up the parts that are A0 first, and then anything that isn't should then be picked up by portal column, and then anything that isn't picked up by portal column, gable column, and so on. So in summary, we've added extra attributes into the project properties which allow you to control the output of the border, or control whether a template is visible or not on both fabrication drawings and GA drawings. We've also added extra attributes into the parts, whereby you can now exclude a part from drawing production permanently by setting this attribute to yes, which would likely be existing steelwork, and we can also force a part to go onto an A0 size as well by setting this option to yes. We've also added extra entries into the drawing wizard, as you can see in there. So we've expanded on column, so now we've got column A0, gable column, portal column A0. So the A0 options find the attribute A0 required, and then they are applied to these drawing settings, which will just be a different name, but the layout will be A0. So any columns that aren't picked up with this A0 attribute, it will then look for the ordinary portal column, and then gable column, column A0, and then column. So we've added these variations in because a lot of Tekla users would call the different variations of column, gable column or portal column, which wasn't actually included into the filter. So they weren't picked up by the column filter, so in turn they were eventually picked up by the standard filter, and the standard filter is why sometimes you end up with drawings called standard. So another difference in the UK steel environment now is the assembly drawing settings. We can see from this drop down menu all of the assembly drawings are now prefixed with steel underscore, as are the selection filters. Following with the renaming of the steel detailer role, we now don't include the style prefix. Everything related to steel should now say steel underscore in front of the setting name. So if I just go ahead and load one of these settings, what we'll also notice is object level settings are now active in the assembly drawings. So we've now included object level settings in all instances of drawing settings. And if we go to edit settings to show you this, we can see we've got all of the standard filters and then all of the standard settings, and you'll notice the main difference between most of the drawing settings will be the dimensioning setting. So if we go to dimensioning, we can see from this drop down menu we have a different dimensioning setting for angle, beam, brace, bracket, column, and so on. So all of these will be set slightly different. But we also have for columns in particular, go to edit settings. So columns and bracing all have a different part setting, primarily to turn on the part center line. So if we load, say, steel brace or column, we can see those all have the part center line switched on, but standard has it switched off. So there's slight changes that obviously you can expand upon, but the idea behind this is to allow you to just make one change, and that change should then apply to all drawing settings to avoid you from having to edit each one individually. So if we just do an example there, looking at weld mark, that's using the standard weld mark settings. If we go into weld mark, load standard, we can change the standard setting to say 6 for weld size limit, save as, and then if we open the model folder, the attributes folder, you see there we've got standard assembly drawing weld setting, and we can put that into the firm folder, and then all of these settings, any setting that we load which uses the standard weld mark, will actually use what we've just saved there. In this next section I'm going to demonstrate how to create a foundation plan using the master drawing catalogue, as well as confirm the type of information that you need in the model in order to get the correct quantity call off within the table on the foundation plan drawing, and then we'll also use this example to show the clone selected function within drawings. So to create a foundation plan drawing in Tekla, all we need to do is go to Create Drawings, Master Drawing Catalogue, and if we look under the Steel General Arrangement Drawings folder,
You may need to expand this slightly to see the names of these settings. So we want to choose the Steel GAFP setting, which is the General Arrangement Foundation Plan setting. Right click, create drawings, and then we want to choose the view that we know contains all of the base details. So in this case it's a plan at -450 top of concrete. Tick open drawing and then click create. So we now have one view containing all of the base details, but you'll also notice in the top right of the drawing we have the base types. So these base types will appear automatically providing you've entered these into the components in the model itself. So if I just go back to the model and double click one of these components, you'll see there under the General tab we've got connection codes. So we've got connection code E. So all identical base plates to this one will also have connection code E. So effectively you group the identical base plates together and assign them a different connection code. So if we have a look at this one, which is clearly different, this is connection code A. And we would also expect this one to be A as well. Yeah. So if we go back into the drawing, so what this allows us to do, because we've grouped the base plates together, we can then get a quantity of each base plate within this table, and then the next step we would want to start adding the detail views to actually show what these base types looks like. So to do that we just hold shift and click detail view, or double click detail view, and we want to find steel foundation base detail from the view properties drop down. Load this setting, and what you'll find in there, it actually utilizes the connection mark. So if we click connection mark, we can see this connection mark actually uses a template, so mark template to be specific. So template GA steel found mark. If we apply this to one of the bases, this information there is the template mark, so it contains multiple attributes, and it's effectively just like a drawing template. It's created in template editor, except it allows us to have text and the attributes and format it in a way that you might not be able to achieve with the regular mark options that we have here. So once you've added a base type on, or sorry, the base detail to show the base type, we can move this into some space, and then we could go ahead and add the other base types on there. So I'll just do two there as an example. So we can see there we've got base type A, and we've got base type B, and then if we look at this table there, we've got 5 base type A's and 4 base type B's. So the next process would be to start adding the dimensions onto the bases. So in this demonstration I'm going to utilize the clone selected command. So the clone selected command basically allows you to copy any annotation or dimensions from one view to another view, or to other parts within the same view, which is what we'll be doing now. So if I just put some dimensions on this base plate, or the bolt, sorry, just move that down a bit, and vertical. So what we can do with this, instead of actually going around each base plate and dimensioning them up, is if we activate the clone selected command, and we just want to choose the select and clone content option. So if we look in the bottom left there, it says pick source object for cloning, or continue with the previous source selection. So we don't have a previous source selection, so we're just going to pick the new objects. So if we just window around those dimensions, so you can see that I didn't actually pick that up there, so if I do another window, that's picked up both dimensions, and it knows these dimensions are associated to these points. If we then press the middle mouse button, that's expecting us now to window around other parts that we want to copy these dimensions to. So if I window around everything there, you can see where it can put them in, it has done. And there are some situations where it hasn't actually worked. So it is probably because of the orientation of the columns. So you can see the columns with the flange on the left and the flange on the right all seem to have the dimensions on there, but the other rotations of columns don't actually have those on. So what we can do there is, and this may be something you do originally, is add a couple of variations into there. So we'll mark up this column, and then if we go back to clone selected, select and clone content, window around, middle mouse button and window around again, we can see that's now picked up all of the missing base plates. So you will notice as well that some of these columns are actually offset from the grid, as well as these ones that are actually on this grid line. So we can actually utilise the same cloning command to pick up these offsets once we've added one offset into there. So if we just do a horizontal dimension from the centre of this column to the grid intersection, so that's 160mm offset from grid. And then if we use the clone selected command again, just window around this one dimension, middle mouse button and window around everything within the view, you'll see that it's actually put the offset on for everything that's offset from the grid.
So this concludes the webinar. We'll now take a look at some of your questions. For any that need further research or require a longer answer, an email will be sent out to address these. So again, thank you for listening, and I will now proceed to answer those questions.